In New Jersey, a father is dead, beaten to death with a metal baseball bat in front of his own daughter. And the man accused of carrying out that deadly attack? Well, according to family members, it was the victim's longtime best friend. Police say Louis Serbeck went to confront the son of that friend after the young man allegedly assaulted Serbeck's daughter the day before. What was supposed to be a conversation to clear the air turned deadly. I'm your host, Kennedi Walker, and I'll walk you through the details. In this photo obtained by the New York Post, 19-year-old Brooke Serbeck is seen with two swollen, blackened eyes. The aftermath, she says, of a brutal beating. According to the Post, Brooke claims she was attacked while at the home of 55-year-old Eric Hanna and his 17-year-old son. In the wake of that alleged assault, she turned to her father, Louis Serbeck, known as Gus. Gus and Eric Hanna had reportedly been friends since high school. According to a statement from the Cumberland County prosecutor, Gus Serbeck and his daughter went to the Hanna's home for what was meant to be a conversation about what happened. Instead, things turned violent. The complaint states the teenager met Serbeck at the front door and allegedly struck him in the head multiple times with a metal baseball bat. Moments later, police say that elder Hanna joined in, helping his son and allegedly beating Serbeck with a metal flashlight. Serbeck's daughter, Brooke, was also injured, allegedly by the same teen accused of assaulting her the day before. Serbeck was rushed to the hospital, but died on the way there. In an interview with the Post, the Hanna family pushed back hard on the Serbeck family's account, calling it fabricated. They claim Brooke Serbeck's injuries, the two swollen eyes seen in this photo, happened after she was allegedly drinking. According to them, Brooke became unruly, and when the family tried to ask her to leave, a physical altercation broke out. They say she allegedly began shoving people and pulling hair. At that point, they say it was a 14-year-old girl, the younger sister of the 17-year-old suspect, who struck Brooke, causing her blackened eyes. They further claim Brooke lied to her dad about what happened that night, and when Gus Serbeck returned to their home the next day, they allege he threw the first punch at the teenage boy, forcing the teen and his father to defend themselves. Despite those claims, both Eric Hanna and his 17-year-old son were charged with homicide and weapon offenses. The teen also faces an additional charge of aggravated assault for the alleged attack on Brooke. Serbeck's brother Christopher spoke with Live 5 News and said Gus, quote, literally laid his life down for his daughter. Now, the Serbeck family is rallying to raise funds for Gus's funeral and to support his two surviving daughters. They describe him as, quote, one of the bravest, most caring, outgoing, warm-hearted, funny, and protective men to be known. And joining me to talk more about this is trial attorney Aaliyah Roberts. Aaliyah, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me, Kennedy. Very, very excited.
So let's start with the charges. Can you explain what constitutes aggravated assault in this case?
Sure. Aggravated assault is normally the intentional contact upon another person, but with a weapon. That's what adds the aggravation portion of the specific charge. And in New Jersey, aggravated assault comes from it allows you a sentence anywhere between, the actual statute says, attempt by physical menace to put another in fear of imminent or serious bodily harm. Like again, that's what makes it aggravated. I think the bat, because there's a weapon involved in this case, that's what makes it aggravated. But you can also have attempt of the specific statute.
And let's just talk more about those weapons. Allegedly a metal baseball bat and a metal flashlight. How serious are the weapon charges that both suspects are facing?
Sure. So when you go from simple assault to aggravated assault, as I said, that's with a weapon. But those charges, they carry a sentence of 5 to 10 years in prison. And you can also have a fine of up to $150,000.
And speaking more just about the years that they're facing, 5 to 10 years, but how many for this, since the victim is dead?
Yeah, I foresee additional charges being filed past aggravated assault. I think the homicide charges were filed, if I'm not mistaken, because once, of course, you have a loss of life, it's no longer assault because the person isn't there to testify and tell their story. So now we're looking at homicide, which can face, anywhere from 25 years up to life in prison, and without the possibility of parole, depending on the severity of the case and the prosecutorial strategy.
And let's talk about the potential forensic evidence. So, potentially blood splatter, fingerprints. Could forensic evidence from the scene strengthen the prosecution's case?
I think so, yes, of course. I mean, I think for what was interesting to me is as a prosecutor, you want to have the entire story. You want to know what happened that caused the murder. You want to know what the aftermath is. And here, there was an underlying assault that wasn't necessarily investigated that I'm curious as to how, if at all, that would tack on additional charges. But for the homicide charges, there's forensic evidence, there's blood, there's witnesses, right? It's not necessarily a he said, she said. There's a lot of witnesses in this case.
And it just seems like, this case, just reading it, there was just so much going on. How will investigators determine who threw the first punch in a situation like this when the victim's family is saying one thing, the suspect's family is saying something else? How, just break it down. How will that work?
It all comes to credibility. Of course, the prosecution is going to choose to lean towards the side of the victims, right? Because they have to prosecute their case. But it all comes down to how credible do these witnesses present on the stand, right? It's silly, but something as simple as, unpaid parking tickets or a small misstep in like a fraud from 10 years ago, that can make you not credible. You didn't pay your taxes for 10 years. That can make you not credible. It has nothing to do with the actual case itself. But when you go on the stand, you want to have a witness that is as squeaky clean as possible because that helps them to be believable or otherwise credible.
Is self defense a plausible argument in a homicide case like this one?
I believe that it is. I think it's going to be difficult because the defense is going to make an argument that Gus Kerback, I believe his name is, he went to the home with the intention to cause harm. That's what the defense is going to say. There's this underlying assault. He showed up to confront the defendants and specifically cause them harm. But of course, the prosecution's going to say, no, he showed up because he's a father and his daughter told him something happened and he wanted to get to the bottom of it. So it's really going to be a lot of the pointing of the fingers. But I think from a standpoint of credibility, it would really be helpful if the underlying assault was investigated.
But I guess I just get confused because is it self defense when we're talking about a metal baseball bat, right? And it appears by reading it, so allegedly, but that it wasn't just one hit or two hits. It appears as if he was hit multiple times with something as hard as a metal baseball bat. That can cause some serious damage, clearly, since he's deceased now. So, how exactly can they argue that they were defending themselves with the bat and not just giving, like, a warning hit or something?
Right. So when the whole purpose of self-defense is you have to minimize the harm, right? I'm arguing that I was in imminent harm as the person who was attacked, and I used, in this case, a metal baseball bat to prevent the harm from continuing. So sometimes you can argue that, I still felt like I was in harm even if they were on the ground. That's when it boils down to, well, how many hits were there, right? Like the baseball bat. If you hit them with a metal baseball bat once, that's self-defense. But if you continue hitting that person over and over again, now we're looking at homicide because the harm, there was no longer a harm once the victim was then hit with a baseball bat on the ground, unable to fight back in any way.
And speaking more about that credibility, I guess it's just how can it be proved if the suspect's family is saying that, hey, we were defending ourselves because he came over to our home and he did this and he did that. How do they prove? Because technically, Mr. Serbeck did go to their home. He was on their property, but still, it's not an excuse of killing someone, correct?
Right. Right. I think, again, it goes down to intent. Well, thankfully, in 2025, we have a lot of different tracking devices. We have GPS locators. We have the data in our cell phones. We have cameras. So it can show on the outside that Gus went to the suspect's home to have the conversation, right? We don't know, especially if we're talking about a father whose daughter told them that they had been assaulted. I think that most reasonable people would argue that he was going to the suspect's house to do more than just talk. Of course, we have to have more evidence and more information, but just on its face, when someone tells a parent that they've been harmed, the parent's going not just to have words, right? The parent's going to confront the person that harmed their child. And I think that's what happened here. I think that one could argue that Gus did not have a weapon, right? He didn't present with, these things to harm the other side, the suspects in this case. He didn't have a gun, there wasn't a knife, right? So that kind of diminishes the self-defense argument. Because again, if I hit you first and you hit me with a baseball bat, there is no harm. The harm has then been, it's no longer existent. So then you have to stop, because if you continue, now we're looking at homicide.
Absolutely. And, the suspect's family, they gave a public statement saying that, just allegedly that the Gus's daughter wasn't assaulted in the way that she claims, that she was, under the influence of alcohol allegedly, and she, was unruly. And then a young teenage girl was the one that hit her, not the 17-year-old suspect, or not the best friend of Gus Serbeck. Just gave a completely different statement, just trying to say that what they said happened did not happen, allegedly. So how important is it that the suspect's family gave a public statement, and can it be used against them?
Every statement that you use in an investigation can be used against you, right? Anytime you speak to the media, anytime you speak to a camera, the investigators, the police officers, the prosecutors are definitely looking at what you're saying and how you're saying it. I think that using painting the daughter as, not a victim, right? Saying that, oh, well, she was drunk and she was unruly. Well, I don't know about you, but sometimes people drink. That doesn't change the fact that they've been assaulted. It just means that they were drinking when they were assaulted, right? So I think immediately pointing the finger to try to change the fact that someone has died is also very eye-opening. Also seeming like the suspect's family is trying to get ahead of the story and try to paint their narrative. And it also gives a glimpse as to what the defense's strategy is going to be. That's also why interviews like this are so important, because they have an attorney, and their attorney told them what to say, how to say it, and how to present it to the media in order to gain sympathy from the media.
And how much weight exactly does a 14-year-old's alleged involvement carry in court? Because again, they're saying, per an interview that the suspect's family did with the New York Post, they're saying that it was the 14-year-old that hit, Gus Serbeck's daughter in the face. It was her, and not who is currently in jail right now. So how much weight does that young teenager's alleged involvement carry?
I think it's very, very important, because it throws a ring into the whole argument of the reason that Gus went to the house was to confront these individuals who harmed their child. I think, of course, he's relying on what was said to the daughter. There is a potential argument to be made that if the daughter was lying and it's proven with the evidence that the daughter was lying, she could potentially be charged with related incidences to leading to the homicide of her father. Not necessarily homicide, but a lesser offense, simply because her lies started this entire confrontation, which led to her father unfortunately passing away. And
Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so it's called aiding and abetting, right? So you created the situation that led to someone passing away. It's similar to like in a felony where you gave the gun to the felon knowing that they were going to rob the bank, right? You kind of winded up the individual's back, and that's what led them to unfortunately having this confrontation and and Gus in this case being murdered, right? Because I'm relying on your statement. I'm believing that it's true because you're my child. I'm going to confront these individuals. I'm now attacked. I'm no longer alive. But if you weren't telling the truth, well, I know that people are thinking, well, oh, that's so horrible, but you caused the situation to be what it is. Now, most prosecutors might not go that far, but sometimes prosecutors want to make an example.
Absolutely. And so, but let's say that they were caused, like, right, let's just say hypothetically they were caused by that 14-year-old instead of the two men that's currently in jail. If Brooke Serbeck's alleged injuries were caused by the 14-year-old, could that minor face charges?
It depends. I think that they might face juvenile charges. They might have to do something, because that would be a family court situation. I find it very unlikely that they would be charged as an adult at the age of 14. So that would be something that would turn over to family court. They might have a simple assault charge. There might be something that they could charge with them there. But again, I think that especially if it's a first time offense, more likely than not, it will be handled in family court.
And could this also, similar to what you were saying about, they spoke to an attorney and maybe an attorney is telling them this, couldn't this also just be a way to get out of it if this isn't true, like, oh, maybe a 14-year-old, because like how you said, most likely a 14-year-old isn't going to be charged as an adult for an assault, right? So isn't that just a way to say, oh no, it wasn't the 17-year-old, man or young man, it was the 14-year-old lady, the young 14-year-old girl? Isn't that just a way for them to kind of take responsibility off of that to potentially get them from getting in more trouble?
Kennedy, you need to go try this case. Absolutely, right? That they definitely, anything can be a scapegoat, right? In this case, if we say I didn't do it, this person did it, then I then paint my self-defense argument, because if I didn't commit the assault, all that I was doing was defending myself when some dad who was erratic came to my home and tried to attack me. Right? There's the argument. I didn't do this. I wasn't even involved in the assault of this younger of Brooke. I wasn't involved in that. I was, at the party somewhere else doing something else. This 14-year-old girl did it, and I was just defending myself. That definitely helps their self-defense argument.
Absolutely. And just it seems like the water just gets murky because of the prior relationships, right? Does the fact that both parties had the prior relationships, they're saying that Gus, the victim, and the suspect, the older suspect, that they have been friends since high school. Does that complicate the legal process?
I don't think it complicates it. If anything, it allows to paint for a picture, right? Unfortunately, situations happen where family members, attack each other, and it's the same situation. There are relationships that are underlying. I think that if there is some sourness or bitterness in the relationships, especially now, we're going to see, for lack of a better term, the claws come out, and everyone's going to be, trying to look out for their own best interests.
If you were the defense attorney in this case, how would you try it?
I think if I was the defense attorney in this case, I would, of course, lead with self defense. I am going to paint Gus Kerbeck as erratic. I'm going to try to find anything in his background. If maybe when he was younger, there was some sort of assault, if he got in trouble in school a lot, I'm going to paint him out to be somebody who is aggressive if I can't find enough evidence to argue violence. And his aggression, and then coupled with the fact that he was told this lie from his daughter, he relied on that lie and attacked my client, who was the defendant in this case, and my client was doing everything they could to defend themselves. When you're being attacked, you don't automatically know that the harm is no longer an issue, right? You're the heat of the moment, it's the aggression, you're in a fight, you're trying to make sure that the person who's attacking you cannot continue to attack you. Now, of course, the prosecution would then say, but a metal bat after multiple times, be for real. But that's the argument that I would make.
Absolutely. And then also, if the defense claims that Mr. Serbeck threw the first punch, could the claims that he allegedly threw the first punch reduce the charges from murder to manslaughter?
Potentially, yes, because then we have the self defense doesn't automatically mean that you get off, right? I think a lot of people think that, oh, it's self defense, so I'm not going to jail. That's not what that means. What it means is there was a justifiable reason as to why the situation happened, and in this case, it's a homicide, right? So I was justified in unaliving this person because they were attacking me. Right? It's hard to argue justification after the person's on the ground. That's going to be a huge, huge, huge piece of this specific case. How many times did you hit Gus with the metal bat? Was he on the ground after the first hit, or was he still standing up? Was he still coming towards you after you threw the first hit? Was he still, did you feel like you were still in harm after you were hit with the baseball bat the first time? Right? That's going to be a huge, huge piece of that. Because if the answers were yes, then of course the second hit was justified, because didn't feel that I was safe, right? It's all about, I want to make sure that I am safe because this person attacked me. But if not, then, well, we're looking at homicide.
Will the fact that the 17-year-old is a minor change how he is prosecuted?
Um, I think that the defense might try to argue family court. I think in this case specifically, it will highly be unlikely, especially if, I don't know when his birthday is, but if he turns 18 before they go to trial, then of course he's already an adult, and then it will be kicked from family court to regular court anyway. I think it's definitely a strategy to use to argue that this is a young young adult. They're not an adult, right? They're 17. They should still be considered, it should still be held in a family court. But I think in the state of New Jersey that the age of responsibility is 17 or it's 16. I'm not sure. I know with raise the age in different states, it was going up for criminal charges.
Could plea deals be on the table? And if so, what could one potentially look like?
Definitely plea deals, right? Plea deals are always an option. This isn't one of those cases like Madoff where we want to make an example. I think that trying to get the homicide charge reduced, assuming that it's charged with second degree murder, maybe we can be looking at manslaughter instead of murder because the intent itself was not there with the self defense argument. So instead of, second degree murder, instead of first degree murder, we could be looking at involuntary manslaughter, right? Which has lesser offenses. I think involuntary manslaughter ranges anywhere between 10 to 15 years versus the 15 to 20 that first degree murder would have, or the potential opportunity to be charged with life.
What rights do the Serbeck family have as victims during the legal process? Can they potentially sue for wrongful death?
I think they can, right? Civil suits are always an option, especially because the evidence that has to be shown is not the same evidence that has to be shown in a criminal case, right? In criminal cases, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. In civil lawsuits, it's preponderance of the evidence. So there's a lesser height that you have to prove in order to be in civil court instead of in criminal court. There's definitely an argument to be made there. I think when you consider civil suits, you also have to consider whether or not the family is capable of paying that lawsuit. Getting a judgment for millions of dollars is great, but if the family doesn't have millions of dollars, it's kind of pointless, right? So and you're paying a lawyer to do all of this, so it's definitely a strategy standpoint from the family.
And before I let you go, how long could this case take to go to trial?
Most cases that take to go to trial now are looking at anywhere from a year to 3 years. I don't know that this is a case that actually goes to trial. I foresee there being a lot of plea deals and negotiations, especially considering that, there is unfortunately a lot that we don't know. And I think if we don't know it as, normal individuals who are just reading the cases and reading what the investigation is happening, I'd argue the prosecution also doesn't know a lot. And they're also trying to suss out who is, who's credible, who's not, getting all the evidence, getting all the records. Sometimes that can take a while, subpoenaing cell phone records and getting the judges to sign off on subpoenas for evidence. That can take a while. But I think in a case like this, anywhere between a year to 3 years.
All right. Well, this is something that we will be following closely. Aaliyah, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Kennedi.
At the time of this recording, it's unclear if Eric Hanna's 17-year-old son will be charged as an adult. For Law and Crime, I'm Kennedi Walker.